All right, well, we're in the 6th week of this quarter. No, we're not. It feels like it to me. I cannot believe this is the last week of the quarter. I just want to get started. I want to thank all the guys who have taken a shot or taken a turn at teaching. Blake and Adam and where's the rest of them? Zach taught some. Mike, Eric. Really appreciate that. That to me is one of the cool things about this class. We've tried to do that for the last 3 or 4 years. I think it just gives a good perspective. It gives you a chance to get to know a guy as a teacher, but it also gives a little different perspective than just me or just any one teacher. We're all teaching the same material, but Zach's going to teach differently from me, from Blake, or from whoever. So I really appreciate those guys doing that. That being said, next quarter we won't have this class. For the summer quarter, we'll all be together on Sunday mornings, and I'm teaching this class next quarter. The class is called Jesus Said Go, and it's a study of Jesus' go statements. And usually we think going to all the world, and that kind of stop right there. But what has been pretty interesting to me is there's several different statements where Jesus tells us to go do something. So that'll be our study on Sunday mornings for next quarter. This morning we're going to wrap up. Let me finish that thought. And then in the fourth quarter, October, November, December, we're going to take this group and we're going to split this group. One of the things that you've probably heard me go through this before. When we started this young adult ministry in 2017, 18, whatever it was, one of the things that I told the elders is one thing I really want to have is a Bible class, a Sunday morning Bible class that always happens, because I think it's a good connection point. Obviously, the deeper connections are going to happen elsewhere, but one of the feedback I got from our elders is, well, that's a large age group. You got people as old as like Adam in here with like people like Brad and like Ethan and Adam, some of the younger people. But what I told them is, when I'm sitting in a class in the auditorium with Nolan Fox, nobody cares. I mean, our age is a little different. But so one of the things that I have appreciated about this is that generational mentoring that can kind of happen. That all being said, next quarter we're going to split. Or not next quarter, fourth quarter, October. We're going to split. We're going to have our young adults on that end and our young families on this end. Now, here's the thing. You get to decide who you are. I'm not going to touch that one. But what we're kind of thinking is our college age, I've used this before, our sinks and dinks, the single income, no kids, double income, no kids. So, like I said, you decide where you belong, but we'll have a class down here and a class down there. We'll have to talk really quietly so we don't talk over each other. But we'll close both those sliding things, and we think we'll make it work. So we're going to take a run at that in the fourth quarter. Don't know what the topics are yet. We're kind of wrestling around with a couple of different ideas. But anyway, so next week in the auditorium, coming up in October, both ends of here for all of us. So that's the plan. We're going to wrap up Paul's sermon on Mars Hill in Acts chapter 17 this morning. As we progress through this, we've had several different ideas. We'll get to that in a minute. But this lesson obviously is the wrap-up with this, because we finally get the result. We finally get, here's what happened. Before we get into class, I asked Richard if he would to lead us in a prayer. Do we have any prayer requests this morning? We've got teen camp starting a week from today. Preteen camp, like as soon as we walk out of camp, it seems like, starts right after us. So we got young adult camp happening Wednesday, Thursday, something like that. So summer camps are hitting right now. So that's something to keep in your prayers.
I haven't gotten the update from Jimmy, my friend.
Mm-hmm.
But his manufacturing company laid people off and his back's having issues. I need to find work.
April's friend Jimmy looking for work and dealing with some back issues. Anything else? Okay, Richard, if you would, please.
Heavenly Father, we come before you this morning. Father, we thank you for the wonderful day that you've given us. Thank you for the time that we have gathered here to study your word, worship, with fellowship one with another. Father, we so much look forward to this. Father, this morning, hold up Jimmy to you. We know that this is work, and Father, we just bless him in that endeavor, that you find him on the table, that you help him with whatever back or pain issues he might be having. We pray that you ease those pains and help him just to get up and Lord, we also pray for all the camps that we have going this week. Pray that those will be successful and go well there. And we pray for anybody that might be traveling this is a holiday week and a lot of out and about. So we pray that you would keep everybody safe, bless their time with family and friends. And Heavenly Father, I pray that you would bring all of us back to the city. Again, we thank you. We look forward to worshiping you today, and we pray that please with our worship. Love you, and in the name of Jesus Christ.
Amen. Okay, I think Blake kind of asked this a little bit last week, but I'll ask again. In this quarter, in this sermon that Paul shares at Mars Hill, short, really. I mean, this is one of the things that, Paul, when he writes, he goes on forever and ever. We have a couple of sermons that are a little too short for us preachers. But what stood out most to you about this? I mean, any sort of theme, any sort of topic, any sort of attitude, maybe even.
In verse 32, when it says that when they heard about the resurrection of the dead, some of them sneered, but others said, we want to hear you again on this subject. I think that's the same hurdle we have today.
Mm-hmm.
You go to some of these college classes and teach history or whatever. Nobody denies Jesus lived. Nobody denies he walked, preached, he died on the cross.
Mm-hmm.
It's the resurrection that people struggle with. So I think that's just interesting. It's been thousands of years.
Yeah.
Same hurdle.
Yeah, that's a great point. In fact, that's where we're going to dig into some more this morning. The hurdles that Paul faced, same hurdles that we face. Blake talked last week about the resurrection. What a game changer that was for Paul, and how impactful that should be for the rest of us. What else? I'll throw out mine. Paul's bravery. I mean, just the fact. I mean, it's got to be uncomfortable. First of all, it starts out with him saying, "Who is this seed picker? Who's this ignorant country boy that's standing up there talking?" And then they say, "Why don't you come in here right in the middle of all of us and get out of your own comfort zone and come tell us all the stuff you're talking about?" That's a little awkward. That's going to be an uncomfortable moment. But Paul says, "All right, here we go." And he comes out swinging. I mean, he says, "I've looked around your whole city. I see all these idols. But there's one that you need to know. There's the one God you need to know." What else?
Like we're talking about, like the story of the different gods, like to sacrifice to all these gods and have one for an unknown. I didn't know that's why they had the unknown god. So that was kind of cool. And
Yeah.
kind of the culture, and that he knew the culture well. He knew the stories that what people were reading and can relate to. It's like, I found that class very interesting. So
Yeah. That Paul knew their writers. He knew their culture. In fact, that would be, I'm not sure that's really a word, adaptivity. Maybe it's adaptability, but I just made that word up, I guess. But that whole idea that he doesn't get up there and start with, maybe somewhere he would normally start. He starts where they are, and I think that's so important. Yeah. Yeah, he brought the true God to people who obviously had a mindset of seeking out God. And like I said, as Zach pointed out in his class, there was this idea of, there's gods that have impacted us that we're not sure who they are, but let's build an altar to them anyway. One of the other things I thought was kind of interesting, I learned from this picture, is apparently this was the origin of these type doors. I didn't realize those came along that early, but thought that was interesting. So, when we think of this whole moment, this whole scene with Paul, as he wraps up this idea, he's just talked about the resurrection, as we've talked about. Blake mentioned last week. Let's look at verses 32 through 34. And we'll close this out. Somebody want to read that? The Christian Standard reads a certain way, but I'd like to hear what some other translation says. ESV, that's chapter 17, verse 32 through 34.
Now when they heard of the resurrection of the dead, some mocked. But others said, "We will hear you again about this." So Paul went out from their midst. But when men joined him and believed, among them also were Dionysius, Areopagite, and a woman named Damaris, and others with them.
See, that's why I didn't want to read. I wanted you to deal with those names. So it says that some, yours said mocked. What do any other translations say? Sneered. Laughed. The Christian Standard just says they begin to ridicule him. Why? I mean, what's that? Because people don't do that. That is not what happened. Now, what's interesting is that it wasn't his philosophy. It wasn't his theories about life, even about God, that caused this interruption. Because this to me kind of reads like an interruption. So he starts talking about and God raised him. He gets in verse 31. And he says, because he set up a day where he's going to judge the world in righteousness by the man he's appointed. He's provided proof of this to everyone by raising him from the dead. When they heard about the resurrection of the dead, then the ridicule starts. So it seems like this was kind of an interruption. So it seems to me that their problem wasn't necessarily with his philosophy. It was when they got into when he got into their wisdom. You know, because their wisdom was you die and you're buried, you're done. But when he starts getting into something that contradicts their thinking, I mean, they're all okay with, tell me about your other God, because we've got 400 of them. But when it comes to him talking about this whole resurrection of the dead, that's where it's got to stop. Do you have something?
Feels like snake oil.
Yeah.
If someone tries to tell you, well, if you rub this on your head, you'll grow hair. But if they start with healthy living and being healthy and exercise, and you agree with all that, oh yeah, that makes sense. Oh, but this is also healthy living. Rub this on your head, you'll grow hair. That final conclusion is like they agree up to a point, and then like, well, then that's the snake oil.
Yeah.
Resurrection. That's something else.
Yeah, and it does seem like maybe it's not agreement, or it's at least tolerance. They're at least going, okay, all right. And then he brings up this whole resurrection. They're like, wait. That is the snake oil. John.
And Paul would say that in 1 Corinthians as well, right? Where he preached Christ crucified, stumbling block to the Jews and foolishness to the Greeks.
Right, 1 Corinthians 1:22. For the Jews ask for signs, the Greeks seek wisdom. But we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to the Jews and foolishness to the Gentiles. And that he's even talking just about Christ crucified. The whole idea of this Messiah would be killed. To the Jews, that's like, wait, no, that's not what we had. That's the stumbling block. To the Greeks, that's like, that's stupid. Why would your hero that's going to rescue your people, why would he end up being crucified? And that's, I mean, like, not, I don't mean to minimize that, but that he's just right there talking about the crucifixion. He doesn't even get to the resurrection. So the people hear these mockers. It seems to me, and like I said, you might disagree, but it seems to me like that ends the discussion. That's where the crowd goes, oh, okay, it was fun while it lasted. And that's got to be tough. I mean, nobody likes that. I mean, it's one thing about preaching. Very rarely do people just get up and walk out on you. I mean, they sit there and wait till it be 11 or whatever, and they go, okay, I'm done. But at this point, it seems like the crowd starts to just go, okay, that's all, Paul.
Every generation has the same situation going on where there's religious knowledge of today and the modern day prophets that everyone thinks can tell the future, and the prosperity gospel. It's all focused on this life, right? And same thing. Well, all these gods, they're not caring about us after death. It's all focused on this life.
Yeah.
It's an absolute pattern.
Yeah.
Going on today.
Well, and it's absolutely the Greek mindset that this is it, that gods will take care of you here, and after that you're dust, or the afterlife is very, very debated in Greek mythology, what actually happens.
My brother-in-law that I have been having religious discussions with often, he's not able to come to our church, but like his stumbling block is like, I don't believe anything in the Old Testament. And it's like, because he was telling me all these things that he would never believe, like our church is going to grill him, like when he walks in the door, you don't believe in this, you know, and it's like, that's not, have you ever been to a church, you know, like that's not how we function.
Mm-hmm.
So he came and he saw that we weren't like up there preaching creation every Sunday, or you know, it was like the time he came, it was perfect.
Yeah.
Like I mean, like the Lord's Supper wasn't. It was talking about why we do it, that we don't really believe the body. You know, like he did a really good job. It was a perfect Sunday for him to come to see us.
Mm-hmm.
But like his one thing, I think, is the huge stumbling block that I think he would find. He never fully believes in God as because of creation.
Yeah.
That and that the Bible isn't science at all, and he won't look into how much science the Bible actually has.
Yeah.
Because I think that's his one thing that's stopping him. It's like I can't because you believe in something that is so ridiculous.
Yeah, and that's right where these people seem to be. That you just brought up the one thing that I have to go, no, that's where it ends. We'll talk more about what we deal with today in just a second. So the next group, it says some believed, some said, what'd they say? We'd like to hear from you again about this. These are the people that I'm just calling the delayers, the procrastinators. Now, it's, okay, I'm just going to tell you kind of how I reason through this. They're all right there listening. And Paul brings up something that kind of disperses the crowd. And so I kind of get this mental image of him kind of going, all right, anybody here stand? And then there's this certain group, it seems to be this second group of people who go, you know what? You know, it maybe Thursday, and they just kind of disperse. It's those people who go, you know, I don't really have an answer to what you're saying, but I don't know what I don't really know how to deal with this either. So what am I going to do? I'm just going to blow you off. I'm going to just say, you know, maybe tomorrow if you'd come back, you could be here and talk, and I'll be at home, and I won't know anything you said, and I won't have to bother with this. You ever do this?
I did it yesterday trying to buy a couch. Like we went to Macy's and the salesperson came up, oh, you like this couch? Yeah, we like this couch. Well, you want to buy this couch today? Well, I don't know. Maybe we'll buy it online.
Yeah.
Well, here's my business card. Can I get your phone number so we can call?
Yeah, I don't even have a phone, you know.
We don't want to give you our phone. Like, and at that point, as soon as you start asking for our phone number, we're like, okay, we need to get out of this conversation.
Yeah, it's time to hit the. I mean, those of us with kids, I mean, you've probably done this to your kids. You know, can I do this? Can I do that? Well, let's talk about it tomorrow. And you know what you mean. Hopefully, you'll forget about this, and we won't have this discussion again. I mean, and that's kind of the impression I get here. I saw this. I thought this was great. Procrastinators unite. Tomorrow. I mean, whenever we get around to it, we'll stand together. I read this fake illustration thing, but it was this. Of course, it's a little boy coming to his dad, and but it's so perfect for this. The kid comes up to dad and says, "Dad, I'm doing my vocabulary for school, and I can't find a definition for the word procrastination." And the dad goes, "You know, I've been meaning to look that up for years." I think that's perfect. But that seems to be where these people are. I mean, maybe not, but it does seem like it's kind of, they're definitely different from the first group. They're definitely different from the third group because we see them split into three different categories. Maybe it's not a total rejection at this point, but they're certainly not sold. They're certainly not convinced enough to stick around and listen to Paul further. Yeah.
Their reaction is they did not believe it because the words seemed like
Yeah.
it's not a new idea.
Absolutely. You think about Thomas. Thomas is like, I'm not going to believe that until I see it. But to take that thought even further, what did they end up doing? They didn't believe the women, but what did they do? They went and checked it out for themselves. So that's a great sub-point in that whole idea. Yeah, the idea of not really being sure about this whole resurrection business is, like Tommy said, it's not a new thing. It happened with those closest to Jesus. But they went and checked it out. They found out for themselves, where these people seem to be going, oh, that's not going to work. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. With Felix, where he says, maybe tomorrow I'll listen to you. That maybe someday I'll become a Christian. Yeah. Let's sing. But yeah, so that's group 2. There's the scoffers who are just, nope, none of this. This next group who seem to be the put-offers, the delayers. And then we have the believers. And it mentions Dionysus, and it mentions Damaris. Some people think Dionysus might have been a court official. Damaris might have been someone, she seems to be a woman of some influence. Otherwise, why would they mention their names? It made some sort of impact. So these are people that the earliest readers would have went, oh, really? Dionysus and Damaris? Interesting. So it's not like, to me it seems like the point is these weren't other gullible hillbillies that bought into this. These were people that were like, oh, okay, these are influential people who were willing to listen. Which also kind of drives home the point of how personal faith is. To me, it's just interesting that Luke records their names. There seems to be a reason. But it's also that personal connection. So those earliest readers could go, oh, I know that guy. I remember him. I remember that lady. She was a very well-known. That's interesting that they bought into this. Maybe that's something I could do. If they can do it, I can do it. Remember at the beginning of the quarter, we talked about some writers say that this is the one time Paul failed. Does this seem like failure? That's why I think at the beginning of the quarter, I said, I don't get that perspective. Yes, there's people walk away. Some people mock. Some people are delayers. But people believed. So there were people there who went, okay, this is something that I need to know more about. Now, here's the question. What does it mean to believe? I need this answer from you all because this is going to be one of my camp lessons. So, accept the truth. Cast all doubt aside.
True belief generally comes along with action. It's action in order for you to actually invest in or do something.
Comes with action. Any other thoughts?
I always use the illustration with my basketball team that if you believe what I'm saying is true, you're going to do it. And I'd have a kid, I'd have a hammer that I've got practice with that day, have him put his hand on the wall, and I'd say, I'm going to hit the wall as hard as I can with this hammer right there. And then I'd start to swing. And if he believes me, he's obviously going to move his hand.
Yeah. Right. Do you ever have any doubters? Any broken hand kids? I don't think he's going to hit. But yeah, that's the illustration that I always use is I'm drowning in the ocean, the Coast Guard pulls up and throws me a life preserver that lands right over there. I believe that thing will save me. What do I got to do? I got to reach over there and grab it. There's some action involved. Do you have a King James Bible? Read verse 34 from the old King James. You have it? What is it?
34?
Yeah.
Howbeit certain men clave unto him and believed, among which was Dionysus the Areopagite,
Okay.
a woman named Damaris.
Okay. Read the first part again. Listen to this. Listen to what the old King James says.
Howbeit certain men clave unto him and believed.
Clave unto him and believe. Does anybody else's translation say clave unto him? No. But that is a great perspective of what belief is. They grabbed a hold of it. That's what it's when you cleave something. That's the also uses that same word, a form of that same word, in the idea of leaving and cleaving. When you leave, when a person leaves their family and cleaves to their husband or their wife, it's that it's casting aside all doubt. It's saying, I'm letting go of everything else. I'm grabbing a hold of this. When you cleave to something, you're not going. I mean, it's grabbing a hold, and that's what I think that's so great that expression is used. They clave unto him. We wouldn't have any idea what that means today, but you could look it up and figure it out. But that shows that belief. I mean, and this is such a struggle in our culture today. Belief is not mental assent. Belief is not just going, God, you're right about that. God knows he's right. He doesn't need us to confirm his rightness. He needs us to do something about it. And that's what these people clave, that's such a great word. They clave unto him. So let's back up and let's go through this and let's talk about how we deal with this same situation today.
But counterpoint, right? Like even the demons believe and shudder, and I can believe that eating junk food is good for me, and I still do it. You know what I mean?
Right.
What does that mean? How do you separate out the belief and the action, or just that?
Yeah, I mean, we can have a belief and still not act on it. Yeah, I would say, what is that? What is the term James uses? I can't look it up right now. Where he talks about.
It says they joined him and believed.
Yeah.
The demons believed and shuddered. So
Yeah, stayed away.
action.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. The mental assent. I can believe that the fireman that brings the ladder up to my window when my house is on, I can believe he's a trained person. That ladder looks safe, but you know what? I'm going to stay here in the house because I think I got another route. And that's silly, but that is belief that doesn't act. Faith without works is dead. I mean, faith without works, in that case, you're dead. But it's that idea that there's something you need to do to show your belief.
On the demons thing, I've always looked at that too as, it's not enough to just believe.
Right.
Because obviously the demons they're not safe, right?
Yeah.
But if you think about what that's saying about the demons, is salvation offered to the demons? Are they in a place where they could be redeemed at this point?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. But they still believe. They know who Jesus is.
Right.
And they back off and shudder. So they are taking action in that they are shuddering because they know who he is.
Well, yeah, I mean, like I said, in the New Testament, we have, at least twice where Jesus casts out a demon, and the demon says, hey, I know who you are. Why are you messing with me? So, I mean, there is that acknowledgement. What we see from these people is going the next step. That idea that, okay, because of my belief, it's time for me to do something. It's time for me to act in some certain way. Okay, so let's look at what we can take with this or from this today. That's an awful picture.
Before we leave that, Clint, though, to John's point about junk food,
Mm-hmm.
like you can believe junk food's not good for you, but you can also believe that you're not going to die from junk food. And if they,
Yeah.
it's competing beliefs is what's happening, and I think that's what's happening with the Greeks. They have competing beliefs, and some are taking precedence over others. So while they believe what Paul's saying is good, they don't believe in the resurrection. And what takes precedent? Which belief?
Yeah.
That what is saying is right and smart, or that the resurrection is not important. And so to me, it's more about competing beliefs and which one is most important and overrides all the other beliefs. And
Right.
the people that responded, it's Christ had been crucified, and that becomes the overarching belief that overrides everything else.
Yeah.
And the people that walked away, it was, well, we just don't believe in the resurrection. I don't care what you say, convince me all you want, but once you got to resurrection,
I'm not.
that's the overarching belief that disproves everything else you said.
Yeah, I'm not willing to take that next step because of that one key point that I'm hung up on or whatever. Okay, so when we deal with modern day scoffers or mockers or sneerers, as Richard pointed out, and Risha kind of said the same thing, we have people all around us today who look at not just the resurrection, but they look at, whether it's creation or the flood or even the standards of living that the New Testament supports, and people say that's outdated. That can't be how I'm supposed to live. That can't be information that I'm supposed to process. On Wednesday night, I've been teaching the high school class, a class that we did in here 2 or 3 years ago, Answering Today's Skeptic. And that's one of those things, that there are people who don't necessarily get to this point. They're not sure. What do we do about that? How do we handle that? Look over to 1 Peter chapter 3 while you're thinking. This says, for the high school class, this has kind of been our theme verse for the quarter. Because we know there are people who are going to doubt a lot of things. I mean, even people who are religious people who consider themselves Christians, will take some aspects of what we believe and go, I don't know where you get that. So we have to be able to deal with that. 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 15 and 16 is the passage, like I said, that has been kind of our theme for the high school class for this quarter. But in your hearts regard Christ the Lord as holy, ready to give a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. What does that mean?
I like that it says defense and not offense.
Mm-hmm.
You're not. Thinking about purely what the two words mean. If you're on the offensive, you are, looking for a point of attack anyway.
Mm-hmm.
You're going out of your way to, I don't know. I guess the only word I can think of is attack or jump down someone's throat. The
Yeah.
defense is kind of like it's more. I don't know. I would say it's more peaceable. It's using the skills and the knowledge that you have to sort of guard instead of
Yeah.
instead of
Kind of a different approach to aggression, maybe.
I think the idea here is a prepared answer.
Mm-hmm.
So we should already know exactly what to say.
Yeah.
And I would say that an experienced Christian would take it a step further and know who your audience is.
Mm-hmm.
Just like in our text here, he knew who he was speaking to. So if we know if we're speaking to people that are believers that have fallen away, we might give a different answer or a more complete answer.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you're talking to someone who's a new Christian or an unbeliever, you should have a prepared answer for all those different scenarios.
Yeah.
Ready to go.
And that is, a lot of translations use the word instead of defense just to have an answer. But and I've heard the word there is apologia. It's be ready to be an apologist for what you believe in. And I've heard people debate about whether the word defense is too aggressive or it should be answer. To me, the key word is be ready. You got to be ready to do this. That means you have to prepare yourself for other people's arguments. That means you have to prepare your knowledge. Like Paul. Paul comes into this thing and goes, you can just see him going, okay, there's a Greeks, I know this guy. Let me just quote some of these people. And that builds that automatic connection.
I think all of chapter 3, 1 Peter is really good. And leading
Oh,
up
yeah.
to this verse, he's just teaching you how to be a person.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter who you're talking to, secular or Jew or whatever, just live this way. And then he follows it up with be prepared when the opportunity presents itself, whether it's a defense or an answer or whatever, be prepared. And the whole idea, what Paul's getting at too, is it's a long con, right?
Oh, yeah.
You're going to be working with these people. It's not like this mindset of let's go door knock and baptize and then, okay, I'll see you later.
Yeah.
You're establishing a relationship with these people that you're laying that foundation on a personal level, and when you get the opportunity to bring God to them, that's great. And you have all that foundation to have like a lifelong connection.
Right.
And Paul, I think, is expert at that.
Oh, yeah.
All the people that he's trying to do missionary training.
Oh, yeah, and he's definitely a long game. You look at Corinth. He stays for 2 years when he didn't want to be there in the first place. I say being ready is the key. Really, I think verse 16 is the key. Because he says, be ready to give an answer, yet do this with gentleness and respect, keeping a clear conscience. So when people say, hey, I accuse you of being a jerk, other people go, no, I've heard that guy talk about his faith. He's very polite. He's very normal. He didn't go crazy. That is so key. We want to be those who share God's word with other people. We want to be right. But we have to be careful that it's not just about being right, that it's about winning this person.
I just kind of, this word I never really kind of thought about, kind of what Zach was just talking about too, but he said always be ready to give a logical defense to anyone who asks you
Yeah.
for the account. So it's not necessarily us having to be like, attacking or, the offense. It is very much like live your life so that others will wonder what you have, right?
Right.
And I just never like thought about that. It's not necessarily us having to go out and door knock. It's as much as live your life to make people wonder, and then they'll ask you. And I feel like if people are asking about your faith, it's so much more peaceable than you trying to be like, well, you need this, If they just go like, well, I worry about this, how come you're not? And like that's the time when you're like, well, I got Jesus, I got that peace in me.
It sounds a whole lot like what Jesus taught. Let your light so shine before men so that when they see what you're doing, they will then honor God. Dana.
This is all about trying to reach people and have an influence. I like in 15 that he says, in your hearts, honor Christ as holy.
Yeah.
But he doesn't leave it there, because that's a lot of people, if you're having a discussion with somebody who says, oh, I just know it in my heart, you're like, okay, I can't talk to you.
Yeah.
You've got to have reasoning and warmth.
Absolutely. And that's like I said, that's one of the things I've tried to reiterate with our kids, that your kids, I guess, that this is a thinking process, that Christianity is an intellectual exercise. It's an actual exercise. You're going to be doing things, but it's not just blind faith. There's a lot to be thought through. Okay, so we got these people. We got to deal with them the right way. Be ready to give your answer, but do it the right way. Now then, the procrastinators. This I think is a great deal of our culture. I mean, maybe even specifically our culture. There's a lot of religion in our area. And people just go, I don't know. I just don't know what to. This to me is the skeptic category. Yeah, it's interesting. No, I just don't want to. It seems good, but I don't know. Well, 2 Timothy 4, verse 2. Oh, there it is. 2 Timothy 4, verse 2. Again, Paul's writing to Timothy. He says this. So preach the word, be ready in season and out of season. And here's what you're going to do. You're going to rebuke, you're going to correct, and you're also going to encourage. How are you going to do it? With great patience and with teaching. What does it mean to be ready in season and out of season? All the time. It's very reminiscent of what Peter says. To be ready to give an answer. You never know. There's going to be that person who is procrastinated. There's going to be that person at work that anytime you talk about church, they kind of clam up or whatever. There's going to be a moment. I mean, Lord willing, there's going to be a moment where they go, man, tell me something about that. Be ready. In season and out of season. Mm-hmm.
I think some of the issues in today's society with both of these points, we are so used to outsourcing everything.
Yeah.
We outsource all the jobs around the house, everything you can possibly think to do, we outsource to someone else, and we do that as a whole society quite often. And I think it's really hard then to come to church and not think that that's what that should be done.
Yeah.
When you think about Bible class teachers and how many Bible class teachers have been teaching Bible class for 20 years, so we've created an outsource by that instead of creating new teachers.
Yeah.
And when people come and ask you, well, why do you believe what you believe? Hey, let me call my preacher. Let me get put you in touch with someone who can answer you. Which in some cases we should.
Yeah.
But we ourselves should have an answer as well, first and foremost.
Yeah.
And there should be progression to bring them into elders and teachers to further that.
And that, just because we're running out of time, that is a perfect segue to the last group here, the believers. This is what I'm preaching for Richard this morning. This is what we're going to talk about. For those of you who went to Guatemala, you have to listen with seasoned salt, because you've already heard this before. You think about the Great Commission. Jesus says, go into the world and do what first? Huh? Make disciples. Make followers. Get people interested. That's that whole idea of letting your light shine so people go, I'll ask some questions. Then he says, make disciples, baptize in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. He says, here's what you're supposed to do. Make them followers, then get them into Jesus. Then what's next? teaching them to observe all the things that I have commanded you. That's what Lisa's talking about. This whole idea that we need to be preparing ourselves and preparing each other for those moments when we get that window where somebody says, "Hey, seed picker, come tell us what this is you're talking about." Where you get that procrastinator who finally says, "You know, I've been meaning to ask you this for the last 4 years. What is it about you?" Be ready to have that answer. That order of Jesus' Great Commission, I think, makes a difference. When we look at Jesus said it a certain way, go make followers, get them into Jesus, and then teach them. Keep teaching them. We tend to get people in the water, get them into Christ, and then say, "Okay, you're on your own. Hope it works out for you. Come back and see us Sundays. Be here on time, blah, blah, blah." We need to make sure that we're making disciples. This is what Paul does. I mean, Paul leaves Athens, and continues his journeys doing just that, going and making new followers. Not just new followers, he is also strengthening current followers. And that's something we can't forget about. The importance of that discipleship, the importance of that continuing education, if you will, in our faith. Okay, I hope this has been interesting for you. I hope you've gotten something out of this quarter. Like I said, next quarter, everybody in the auditorium, October, we split. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, be ready to, show why we have devotion to our King. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because there's the King of the world and there's Him. Jesus.
Yeah, we have to be ready. We have to be ready to show why we're in this. Okay, thank you all a bunch.